And what happened on January 1st changed everything. The battle lines have been drawn. 60 to 70% of the world's refined silver supply, now controlled by Beijing, export restrictions activated, hundreds of suppliers locked out overnight. The rare earth playbook is being deployed again, but this time the stakes are infinitely higher. Solar energy, defense systems, the entire clean energy transition, all dependent on one metal. And China just became the gatekeeper. The question isn't whether silver hits $100 an ounce. The question is, what happens when the West realizes the war has already begun? Welcome to Currency Analyzer. If you've been following global markets for decades, like many of our seasoned viewers have, you know that the truly significant shifts aren't announced with fanfare. They happen quietly, bureaucratically, and by the time most people notice, the game has already changed. Before we analyze exactly how China is reshaping the silver market and what it means for your portfolio and business strategy, I'd like to ask you, as one experienced observer to another, to subscribe to this channel. We deliver strategic economic analysis without the noise, the kind of insights that serious investors and business leaders actually need. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from today? Because this story affects every corner of the global economy. Now, let's examine what just happened. On January 1st, 2025, while most of the world celebrated the new year with fireworks and champagne, China quietly activated a strategic weapon that few people understood. It wasn't a missile, it wasn't a trade embargo, it was something far more calculated, far more permanent. China implemented comprehensive export restrictions on silver, and the implications are staggering. Under this new policy, only large state-licensed companies can export silver from China. The requirements are specific and deliberate. A company must have an annual silver production capacity of at least 80 tons. It must maintain a credit line exceeding $30 million. And most importantly, it must receive government approval. These aren't just bureaucratic formalities. They represent a fundamental restructuring of how silver moves through global markets. Analysts estimate that hundreds of small and mid-size exporters have been systematically locked out of the system. These weren't insignificant players. They were key suppliers to industrial users and silver refiners around the world. Businesses that had operated for years suddenly found themselves unable to participate in international trade. The Chinese government recently published a list of exactly 44 companies approved to export silver under the new regulations. 44 companies controlling access to one of the world's most critical industrial metals. A Chinese state news source quoted an unnamed industry insider who described the shift in clear terms. The policy, he said, elevates silver from an ordinary commodity to a strategic material. It places silver export controls on the same regulatory footing as rare earth metals. That comparison is deliberate, and those who remember what happened with rare earths understand why it matters. But China isn't acting in isolation. The United States has also recognized the growing strategic importance of silver. The U.S. Geological Survey recently designated silver as a critical mineral. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. The USGS Critical Minerals List was established in 2017, and it directly guides federal strategy, investment decisions, and mine permitting processes. This designation explains why more mining companies and exploration firms are emerging in North America. It explains why analysts focused on precious metals are covering these developments with increasing frequency. The market is responding to a fundamental shift in how governments view certain commodities, and silver sits at the center of this shift. Along with silver, the Chinese government implemented export restrictions on tungsten and antimony. Both elements are critical in defense technologies. This isn't coincidental. Export controls have become a standard component of China's geopolitical strategy. The Chinese government has used similar regulatory frameworks to control markets for other rare earth metals in the past. One analyst explained the pattern clearly. China uses export controls to secure domestic industrial advantage and global pricing power. It's a proven strategy, and they're applying it again. China ranks second globally in silver mine production. But that statistic doesn't tell the full story. What matters isn't how much silver China mines. It's how much refined silver China controls. And the numbers reveal China's true dominance. The country controls between 60 and 70% of the world's refined silver supply. Let that sink in for a moment. 6 to 7 out of every 10 ounces of refined silver available globally pass through Chinese facilities. According to the London Bullion Market Association, China is home to 27 accredited silver refineries. Japan, which has the second largest number of refineries, operates only 13. This capacity imbalance isn't accidental. It's the result of decades of strategic industrial development. One industry publication described China's position bluntly. The country's massive refining capacity effectively makes it the gatekeeper of the refined silver supply. And now that gatekeeper has closed the gate, just slightly, not enough to cause immediate panic, but enough to send a clear message. Export data from the first 11 months of 2025 reveals the asymmetry. China exported 4,600 tons of silver during that period. In the same time frame, the country imported only 220 tons. China is a net exporter of refined silver, while simultaneously importing unrefined material. This pattern suggests a long-term strategy. Accumulate raw materials, process them domestically, control the refined output, and then decide who gets access. One market analyst published an editorial that captured the situation perfectly. He wrote, "China just weaponized silver, and they did it while Americans were busy arguing about whether Bitcoin is real money." His point was sharp, but accurate. While Western attention focused on digital currencies and speculative assets, China was systematically positioning itself to control a physical resource. A resource that powers everything from smartphones to solar panels to defense systems. The strategy isn't new, but the execution is entering a critical phase, and most people have no idea it's happening. There's a fortress that most investors never see. It's not made of concrete or steel. It's made of furnaces, electrolytic cells, and chemical processing plants. And China built it while the world wasn't paying attention. The true power in the silver market doesn't come from mining the metal. It comes from refining it. Anyone can pull ore from the ground. But transforming that raw material into investment-grade silver bars or industrial quality product requires sophisticated infrastructure. It requires technical expertise. It requires massive capital investment. And it requires something else. Time. Decades of it. China understood this long before anyone else did. While Western nations focused on financial engineering and service economies, Chinese industrial planners were constructing refining capacity on a scale the world had never seen. Today, that strategy has paid off in ways most people are only beginning to comprehend. China doesn't just participate in the refined silver market. It dominates it with an iron grip. Between 60 and 70% of all refined silver flowing through global commerce passes through Chinese facilities. That's not market share. That's market control. To understand the magnitude of this dominance, consider the alternatives. Japan operates the second largest refining infrastructure in the world. Japanese facilities are technologically advanced, quality controlled, and globally respected. They maintain 13 accredited refineries recognized by the London Bullion Market Association. 13 refineries. China has 27, more than double Japan's capacity. And Japan is in second place. The gap between China and everyone else isn't just significant, it's structural. No other nation comes remotely close to matching Chinese refining capacity for silver. Not the United States, not Canada, not Mexico, not Switzerland. Despite its reputation for precious metals processing, the infrastructure simply doesn't exist anywhere else at comparable scale. This creates a dynamic that transcends normal market competition. When one nation controls more than 2/3 of global refining capacity for a critical industrial material, that nation becomes what industry analysts call a single point of failure in the supply chain. Or, more accurately, a single point of control. Chinese refiners don't just process domestically mined silver. They import massive quantities of unrefined material from around the world, process it, and then control its distribution. The export data reveals this strategy clearly. Through the first 11 months of 2025, China imported only 220 tons of refined silver. In that same period, China exported 4,600 tons. The mathematics are stark. China is pulling in raw material, refining it, and pushing out finished product, all while maintaining the ability to throttle that flow whenever strategic interests dictate. And that's exactly what the January 1st export controls accomplished. By restricting which companies can export refined silver, China hasn't stopped the flow of metal. They've simply inserted a checkpoint. Every ounce that leaves the country now requires government approval. Every transaction becomes visible to state authorities. Every buyer becomes known. Information is power. And China now knows exactly who needs their silver. Western manufacturers are beginning to understand their vulnerability. A smartphone factory in California, a solar panel producer in Germany, an electronics manufacturer in South Korea. All depend on Chinese refined silver to maintain production schedules. They've been depending on it for years. The difference now is that dependency has become visible and leverageable. Japan represents the most viable alternative for nations seeking to reduce reliance on Chinese refining capacity. Japanese facilities operate at high-quality standards. And Japan maintains strong economic and security relationships with Western nations. But scaling Japanese capacity to offset Chinese dominance would require years of construction. It would require billions in capital investment, and it would require a level of strategic coordination that hasn't yet materialized. Building a single large-scale refinery takes 3 to 5 years under optimal conditions. Training skilled workers, securing environmental permits, establishing quality certifications. These processes don't accelerate simply because geopolitical pressure increases. The London Bullion Market Association's data paints the picture clearly. Their accreditation system represents the gold standard for precious metals refineries. Facilities that earn LBMA accreditation can participate in international wholesale markets. 27 of those accredited facilities are in China. The infrastructure gap isn't just about numbers. It's about decades of industrial policy choices. While Western economies financialized and outsourced manufacturing, China built capacity, not just for consumer goods, but for the fundamental materials that make modern technology possible. Silver refining was never glamorous. It didn't attract venture capital or generate headline valuations. It was industrial, unglamorous, boring. Until suddenly, it became strategic. One industry source described China's position with clinical precision. China's huge refining capacity, they noted, effectively makes the country the gatekeeper of refined silver supply. Gatekeeper is the operative word. The gatekeeper doesn't need to close the gate completely to exercise control. They simply need the ability to decide who passes through and when. China now has that ability, and they've demonstrated their willingness to use it. The fortress has been built, the gates are monitored, and the world is only beginning to realize they've been inside Chinese territory all along. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes with terrifying precision. And anyone who watched what China did to rare earth metals in 2010 is experiencing a haunting sense of déjà vu. Because the playbook being deployed on silver right now isn't new. It's been tested, refined, and proven devastatingly effective. 15 years ago, China controlled approximately 97% of global rare earth element production. These obscure metals with names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium weren't household words. Most people had never heard of them, but every smartphone, electric vehicle, wind turbine, and precision-guided missile depended on them absolutely. In 2010, Beijing made a decision. They didn't ban rare earth exports outright. That would have been too obvious, too aggressive, too easy for Western nations to condemn politically. Instead, they did something far more elegant. They introduced licensing requirements, export quotas, environmental compliance certifications, quality control inspections. Each requirement seemed reasonable in isolation. Each added just another layer of bureaucratic process. Paperwork, approvals, waiting periods, quotas that somehow never quite met demand. One analyst described it as death by 1,000 forms. Filed in triplicate, the effect was surgical. Rare earth prices didn't just increase, they exploded by 4,500%. A 45-fold multiplication in value, created not by scarcity of the resource itself, but by carefully constructed bottlenecks in access. Western manufacturers discovered something terrifying. They couldn't build smartphones without Chinese permission. They couldn't manufacture missile guidance systems without Chinese approval. They couldn't produce wind turbines without navigating Chinese bureaucracy. An entire generation of supply chain executives learned Mandarin the hard way. The squeeze wasn't dramatic. There were no explosions, no military confrontations, no sanctions announced at press conferences. It was bureaucratic, quiet, relentless. And by the time Western governments understood what had happened, the market had been fundamentally restructured. China had transformed rare earths from commodities into leverage. Now they're doing it again with silver, but the stakes this time are exponentially higher. Silver isn't just used in niche industrial applications. It's woven into the fabric of modern civilization. Solar panels, electronics, medical devices, water purification systems, batteries, conductors, antimicrobial applications. And unlike rare earths, which could theoretically be substituted in some applications, silver's unique properties make it nearly irreplaceable in many critical uses. The physics doesn't care about geopolitics. Silver has the highest electrical conductivity of any element. It has the highest thermal conductivity. It's the most reflective metal. These aren't market advantages. They're fundamental properties of matter. You can't negotiate with the periodic table, and China knows this. The challenge facing global silver markets goes far deeper than export restrictions. It's rooted in geology, economics, and the fundamental physics of mining. Since 2016, global silver mine output has peaked and begun a slow decline. Multiple forecasting agencies project that while silver prices will reach record levels over the next 5 years, mine supply growth will remain stubbornly modest, minimal increases, despite soaring demand. This seems counterintuitive. When prices rise, production should increase to capture those profits. Economics 101, but silver doesn't follow simple economic models. Here's why. More than half of all silver mined globally comes as a byproduct of other mining operations. It's extracted alongside copper, zinc, and lead. These base metal mines produce silver almost incidentally as a bonus revenue stream from ore that's being processed anyway. The economics of these operations are driven by copper markets or zinc markets, not silver markets. Even if silver prices triple, a copper mine doesn't increase production. The mine operator isn't digging for silver. They're digging for copper. The silver just comes along for the ride. This creates what economists call price inelasticity. Massive increases in silver prices don't trigger proportional increases in silver supply. The supply response is muted, delayed, and insufficient. Approximately 28% of global silver does come from primary silver mines, where production decisions are more directly tied to silver prices. But these dedicated silver operations face their own brutal challenges. Ore grades are declining. The silver content in newly discovered deposits is lower than historical averages. Miners have to move more rock, process more material, and consume more energy to extract the same amount of metal. Meanwhile, mining costs are rising rapidly. Labor, energy, equipment, environmental compliance, permitting. Every input cost is increasing faster than productivity gains can offset. And then there's the timeline problem. From the moment a promising silver deposit is discovered to the moment the first ounce is commercially produced, the timeline averages between 10 and 20 years, a decade minimum. Exploration, drilling, resource estimation, feasibility studies, environmental assessments, permit applications, community consultations, infrastructure construction, mine development, processing plant construction. Each phase takes years. One analyst described it perfectly. The supply cavalry isn't coming. It's geologically stuck in traffic. Even if every mining company on Earth decided today to develop every known silver deposit, meaningful new supply wouldn't hit markets until the mid-2030s at the earliest. The gap between demand and supply isn't temporary. It's structural. For 4 consecutive years, silver demand has exceeded supply. The deficit in 2024 alone reached 148.9 million ounces. The cumulative 4-year shortfall totals 680 million ounces. That's equivalent to 10 months of global mining output, simply gone, absorbed into industrial applications, solar panels, electronics, and investor vaults. The Silver Institute projects a 5th consecutive annual deficit in 2025. Some analysts believe it will be the 6th. The market is being drained systematically year after year, and China just positioned itself at the spigot. The future of energy has a weakness, and China just put their hand on it. Every solar panel being installed across Europe, every renewable energy project being constructed in North America, every climate initiative being announced by global governments, all of them share one critical dependency: silver. The metal isn't optional in solar technology, it's fundamental. Silver paste conducts electricity from photovoltaic cells with unmatched efficiency. Engineers have searched for decades to find a cheaper alternative, and they found one. Copper can technically replace silver in solar panel manufacturing. Laboratory tests confirm it works. The physics check out. The technology exists. Problem solved, right? Not even close. What laboratory results don't reveal is the industrial reality of conversion. Transitioning a single solar cell factory from silver-based production to copper-based production requires approximately 18 months. 18 months for one facility. There are roughly 300 such factories operating worldwide. The maximum parallel conversion capacity, assuming unlimited capital and perfect execution, is approximately 60 factories per year. Do the mathematics. That's a minimum of 4 years just to convert halfway. 4 years, to transition 150 facilities. And that assumes everything goes perfectly. No delays, no technical problems, no financial constraints, no supply chain disruptions. In reality, it would take longer, much longer. Solar manufacturers aren't naive. They've been watching silver prices climb throughout 2024 and 2025. They've absorbed a 180% price increase. And they're still buying silver, not because they want to, because they have no choice. Production schedules can't wait 4 years for copper conversion. Customer contracts can't be delayed. Government renewable energy mandates don't pause for industrial retooling, so manufacturers keep purchasing silver at whatever price the market demands. Analyst estimates suggest that silver would need to reach $134 per ounce before the solar sector experiences significant demand destruction. At that threshold, the financial pressure would finally force widespread production halts and emergency conversion efforts. Some banking analysts believe that price point isn't just possible. They think it's coming soon. But solar energy is only one dimension of silver's strategic importance. The defense industry represents another, and the numbers here are deliberately obscure. There are no public figures detailing exactly how much silver goes into military applications. Defense contractors don't publish material consumption data. Governments classify weapons system specifications. But industry analysts confirm that defense sector silver consumption is significant. Missiles use silver in guidance systems. Radar equipment uses silver in circuitry. Communication systems use silver in connectors. Surveillance technology uses silver in sensors. every advanced military system dependent on a metal that China increasingly controls. This isn't speculation, it's strategic reality. One analyst writing for a major financial publication framed China's move with brutal clarity. Beijing isn't restricting exports because the government is worried about speculation. China is restricting exports because it needs the silver and has figured out something that Washington hasn't. He continued, "The clean energy transition runs on metals, and whoever controls the metals controls the transition." That sentence deserves to be read twice. Whoever controls the metals controls the transition, not the technology, not the innovation, not the capital investment, the metals. China isn't just restricting silver exports in isolation. The same January 1st policy included export controls on tungsten and antimony. Both metals are critical in defense technologies. Tungsten is used in armor-piercing ammunition and high-temperature applications. Antimony is essential in flame retardants, batteries, and certain types of semiconductors. This isn't coincidental. This is coordinated resource warfare. Export controls have become a standard tool in China's geopolitical playbook. They've used this approach successfully with rare earths. They've applied it to graphite. They've implemented it for gallium and germanium. Each time, the pattern is identical. Don't ban exports completely. Just add requirements, licensing, quotas, approval processes. Create uncertainty, make supply unreliable, force buyers to negotiate. And while negotiating, maybe discuss joint ventures, technology transfers, market access, political alignment. One analyst described the probable future with uncomfortable accuracy. If you want to build the future of energy, you will need to negotiate with Beijing. Maybe your silver shipment will be approved. Maybe there will be delays. Maybe you'll find yourself suddenly interested in Chinese joint ventures and technology transfers. This is leverage, disguised as bureaucracy. The implications extend beyond industrial policy. They reach into investment strategies and personal financial protection. Physical silver eliminates counterparty risk. There are no margin calls on metal sitting in a vault. No broker can freeze access. No government can digitally confiscate it. No banking system collapse can erase it. It simply sits there, quietly appreciating, while bureaucrats in Beijing shuffle export applications into pending files. This dynamic explains why physical silver demand has surged in recent months. Institutional buyers, family offices, and informed individual investors are recognizing what's happening. Silver is transformed. It's no longer simply a commodity traded on price fluctuations. It's become a strategic asset in a resource war that most people don't even know is being fought. The United States is beginning to respond. The critical minerals designation by the U.S. Geological Survey represents recognition of the problem. Domestic mining initiatives are being discussed. Permitting processes are being examined. But recognition and response operate on different timelines. China spent decades building refining capacity. They positioned themselves systematically. They made long-term investments when silver seemed boring and unprofitable. Western nations are now trying to respond, while already dependent on Chinese supply. The rare earth experience taught a harsh lesson. By the time Western governments understood the problem, market restructuring had already occurred. Alternatives took years to develop. Supply chains couldn't be rebuilt overnight. The same dynamic is unfolding with silver, except this time, the scale is larger, the applications are more critical, the dependencies run deeper, and the timeline for solutions remains measured in years, while the crisis unfolds in months. China just told the world something important, and it wasn't complicated. Silver is no longer a commodity, it's a strategic asset. The question now isn't whether prices will rise. The question is whether the West will recognize the true nature of what's happening before it's too late. Because in resource warfare, the victor isn't determined by who has the most sophisticated technology. It's determined by who controls the materials that make that technology possible. And on January 1st, 2025, China made it clear. They control the materials, they set the terms, and the rest of the world is only beginning to understand what that means.